Hello again and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope you enjoy. Today, we will be covering the case of the Mulhall sisters, better known as the Scissor sisters from Ireland. Now, don't be surprised if you don't hear any mention of scissors in this video, because no scissors were used, but it involves cutting off certain parts, so I assume this might be where the name comes from. But let's get into the case so you have an idea of what actually happened. The Mulhall family lived in Kilcare Gardens, a working class area in the south of Dublin. Parents John and Kathleen Mulhall raised a family of 3 boys and 3 girls. John was allegedly abusive to Kathleen, but they remained together for quite some time. Their marriage eventually broke down, but they continued living together. The 6 children's upbringing was by no means an easy one, with their parents partaking in drugs and alcohol on a regular basis and getting into some really bad fights. Kathleen eventually decided that she wanted to move on and entered into a relationship with younger man and Kenyan immigrant Farah Swaleh Noor in 2002. Noor moved into their family home with Kathleen while John was still living there. But John soon decided that this living arrangement was just not for him, and he took some of the younger children and moved out. He rented various accommodations in Dublin over the period of a year, but ended up moving back into the original family home after Kathleen left and moved to Cork with Farah. This did not work out for Kathleen and Farah, and they soon returned to Dublin in 2004. It seems that Kathleen and Farah's relationship was also not the best, as he was also abusive to Kathleen. Farah Noor arrived in Ireland in December 1996, claiming to be a Somalian called Shalila Salim, whose family had been killed in Mogadishu. Subsequent investigations revealed that he was in fact Kenyan. His name was not Shalila Salim, and that his family was still alive. The Department of Justice, Equality and Law Reform ordered that he be deported, but he appealed, and this was granted. He was granted citizenship in March 1999 on grounds that he had become a father of an Irish-born child, even though he had 4 previous convictions for offences including intoxication, threatening, and abusive behaviour and assault. You see, in 1997, Farah violated a mentally disabled 16-year-old Chinese girl, and because of this, she later gave birth to his son. He also welcomed another son in 1999 with his then 16-year-old girlfriend. The 2 of them stayed together for 2 years, but she later left him due to his violent and brutal beatings that he imposed on her, and also he threatened her that he would kill her. 2 other women also had children by him, and the circumstances were the same as the first. He had also violated them. Noor had later faced 8 charges of disorder and assault. One of these charges involved sexually assaulting someone with a knife, and the knife was found at the scene by the Gardai. He was convicted on 3 occasions, but he had never served time in jail, ever, for any of the things that he had done. Farah lived in a number of areas in Dublin, as well as the inner city, before moving in with Kathleen Mulhall. The Gardai described him as being particularly violent towards women. Not only was he suspected of several assaults, he was also a suspect in an unsolved murder which took place in September 1999. But authorities did investigate this case, and in the end they were satisfied that he did not carry out this murder. By 2005, Kathleen was in her mid-50s, but no one really knows her true age, and that's kind of weird. And Farah, who was by then 38, were still living together. They were living in a flat that Kathleen had been renting in a house in Richmond Cottages, Summerhill. On 20 March 2005, on the bank holiday weekend, Kathleen, with her two daughters, Charlotte and Linda, together with Farah, were drinking heavily in the Dublin city centre. Let me give you a little bit of a background on Linda and Charlotte. Linda Mulhall was 30 years old in 2005. She was unemployed, had left school early, and had 4 children. She had no longer been with the father of her children, but she got into another relationship with a man who subsequently abused both her and her children. In one of these abusive fits, he beat the kids with a plastic electrical flex tube. The abuse was later investigated and the children were taken into care by social services. While Wayne Kinsella served a 7-year prison sentence for his cruelty and abuse towards the children. His sister Donna said that he was always an extremely violent person, even during his childhood, and stated that he used to beat members of his own family, including his parents, and had broken her jaw on one occasion. Linda Mulhall was also not Mother of the Year material. She, meanwhile, had a history of alcohol abuse and suffered from an addiction to heroin. She also had one previous conviction in 1993 for larceny. Charlotte Mulhall was 23 years old in 2005. Like her sister, she also had a history of drug and alcohol abuse. She had a number of minor previous convictions for criminal damage and public disorder offences, and she was charged with criminal damage and given probation in October 2005. She had also been involved in sex work. The day started with Charlotte and Linda spending some time together. Charlotte had convinced Linda to have some drinks with her, as it was a long weekend and they needed to celebrate. So they started drinking and they later called their mum Kathleen, and they decided that they will meet up in the city and sort of continue their party there. The two sisters caught a bus into Dublin City and met up with Kathleen and Farah there. They met at the McDonald's. So, the 4 of them continued drinking heavily, but not at a bar though. Farah bought vodka at a liquor store, and Kathleen purchased Coca-Cola. It was too expensive to be drinking as much as they did at a bar. So they continued drinking while walking around and having some fun in the city. The foursome then stopped on the River Liffey boardwalk to continue the excursion. Here, Charlotte, Linda, and their mother took some ecstasy. Farah declined taking one though. They all were very drunk by this point. At one point, Farah even picked up a random child and shouted, "You see, Kathleen, this is my son, this is my son." Obviously, it wasn't his son though. He kept going on and on about how this child was his, and Kathleen got quite angry and upset with him about this. Farah was going on about this boy, and him and Kathleen started up an argument, and they decided that it'd be better to go back to Kathleen's flat by that point and continue their party there. However, Farah and Kathleen continued arguing on the way to the flat, and Linda and Charlotte just wanted to have a party, and they felt that their mom and her boyfriend were putting a damper on the mood. They put on some music and started dancing when they got back to the flat. Farah was in a foul mood by then, and Kathleen decided this just won't do. He was spoiling their fun, and she decided to crush a tablet of E into Farah's drink, so they were all on the same buzz. However, Farah usually got either aggressive or too handsy when he was on drugs. At one point, Linda and Farah were sitting on a 2-seater couch, and at one point, Charlotte was sort of sitting on the arm of the couch. And it seemed that by this point the E cheered Farah right up. Farah started trying to get Linda to sit on his lap and started touching her inappropriately, pulling her towards him. He started whispering into her ear, put his arms around her waist and refused to let her go, all the while she was trying to pull away from him, but he just didn't want to let go. Kathleen then started screaming at him, and a verbal altercation took place between him and the 3 women, especially between him and Kathleen. Apparently, Farah made a gesture at her, kind of showing that he was going to slit her throat or something of that sort. At this time, he still had his arm around Linda's waist, refusing to let her go. Farah had previously abused Kathleen and he was acting very aggressively, so the three women took his gesture towards Kathleen that he was going to slit her throat seriously. Charlotte then went to the kitchen and picked up a Stanley knife. She shakes the knife at him and tells him to get his hands off of Linda, and he still does not let go. They are all very drunk and very high by this point. And this is when Charlotte struck Noor across the throat with the knife, inflicting a wound that sent him to the ground. But he doesn't die. He manages to get up and stumble around, and Kathleen apparently fears for their lives and tells her daughters, "Kill him or he will kill me." Farah sort of stumbles around and falls backwards into the bedroom, and Kathleen at that point hands Linda a hammer, with which she hit Noor on the head a number of times. Charlotte also got another knife by this point, and she starts frantically stabbing Farah. Farah was stabbed at least 27 times and hit on the head by the hammer repeatedly. What does Kathleen do in the meantime? She sits on the sofa, smoking a cigarette whilst all of this is going on. She later also watched them hitting him and stabbing him, but did not participate in the killing. They had a moment of clarity and realized what they had done, and they start freaking the F out, and one of them starts shouting, "What did we do? What did we do?" And Kathleen starts shouting at them, "Get him out! Get him out!" Farah's body was in the bedroom at this point, and Linda and Charlotte start dragging Noor's body into the bathroom, frantic, not knowing what to do. So what do they decide to do? They decide that they are going to dismember his remains. Now, they didn't really have proper tools for this dismemberment on hand, so they decided that they would use the bread knife and the hammer. Again, Kathleen did not participate in the dismemberment, but she of course knew what was going on. She was in the kitchen, smoking, as all of this was taking place. Charlotte and Linda had no idea what they were doing. It took them around 5 hours, but they ended up separating the body into 8 pieces. They also put towels over his legs to try and stem the flow of blood. They also cut off Farah's private parts, saying, "He will never rape anyone ever again." Girl, he dead. You don't have to worry about that ever happening again. They put the body parts in black plastic bags and in sports bags and started cleaning up.
It would have taken a considerable period of time, and they smashed the bones. They used the hammer to dislocate the head from the torso. It would have been extremely violent.
Linda, at this point, also decides to call her father to tell him what had happened. He probably thought they were high as kites at that point. He decided to go to the flat to check up on them, and when he gets there, everything is clean and he breathes a sigh of relief, thinking that Linda must have just been on a bad trip. But oh no. She takes him to one of the sports bags, opens it, and decides to show him. He obviously, at that point, does not know what to do. He freaks out and tells them he will have no involvement in this whatsoever and leaves the apartment. The two sisters, along with their mother, then make a plan to take the bags with the body parts and empty them into a nearby canal. But they leave the head and they don't dump it in with the rest of the body to prevent the chance of identification. They hang around for a bit at the canal to see if the body parts sink, and when they decide nothing is coming up, they leave. We have no idea what they did with the poor man's wieners though. No idea. Later that day on the 21st, they took the head in a backpack on a bus to another part of town. The two of them walked through the square shopping center. There was actually CCTV footage of them carrying around the backpack, looking into shop windows, window shopping, browsing, etc. with the head in the effing bag. They also even got some food, still with the head in the backpack. They then later go to a park, sit down on a bench, and while they are there, Charlotte started digging a hole with the bread knife and buried the head there. The women are terrified that the murder will be discovered, and they take turns in going back and forth through the canal to check that no body parts had surfaced. but they don't see anything for the next 10 days. But it seems that they only went back to the parts where they actually dropped the parts in. Now, I mean, this is a canal and the water flows, wind and all of that. You should be smarter than this. 10 days after the murder, Noor's leg with a sock attached to the foot was seen floating in the canal, a whiles away from where they dropped the body parts in, a few hundred yards from Croke Park. Immediately, this person that sees this phones the Gardai to report it.
And indeed, a number of passers-by had been walking, had seen what they thought was body parts lying in the water in different parts, but people had assumed that this was actually a mannequin that someone had dumped in, or possibly a very elaborate hoax.
They just didn't think for a second it was human, until one man was walking past and he focused in on it, and he looked, and all of a sudden he realised that he was looking at a foot. And he knew immediately this wasn't a dummy, this was a remains of a human being. So he phoned the guards, and that started what would become one of the most interesting murder investigations we've ever seen in Ireland.
The Gardai sub-aqua divers were then sent into the canal and retrieved most of the rest of his body in 7 parts. At first, it was thought to be a ritual killing of some sort, since his ween and his head had been removed. They also thought that it might be linked to another killing of the same sort that had happened a while ago. The Gardai put out several pleas in the media for the identification of the body found, since they did not have their head to identify him with. Even more freaked out after the discovery of the body, Linda returned to the park where they had buried the head and dug it up. Using her son's school bag, she then moved it to another field where she broke it up with a hammer. She also took some liquid courage with her to help her do this. She had really regretted what they had done. By this point, she prayed on the head while she broke it up. She had been suffering from guilt. Some reports say that she reburied the different smashed up parts of the head, and others say that she dropped it into different bins on her way back from the park. Noor had been identified as the victim 6 weeks after his leg was found, when someone recognized the t-shirt on the recovered torso. That key witness was a Somalian man and friend of Farah. He was also the first to connect Farah to the Mulhall woman, and he was also paid a substantial reward by Crime Stoppers. The 2 sisters and both their parents were arrested in August 2005, but they all denied any knowledge or involvement in the killing. Growing more and more of a guilty conscience after their arrest and release, Linda contacted investigating officers, admitting her involvement. Gardai took a voluntary statement from her at her home in late August 2005. Until this, they had been making limited progress in the case, and if it weren't for Linda's confession, it might have taken years to solve this. The Gardai then went to search the Mulhall flat in Summerhill, where they found bloodstains that were confirmed to match Farah's DNA.
We were satisfied at that point that flat 1, 17 Richmond Cottages was actually the scene where Farah Swaleh Noor had been actually murdered.
After finding out about Linda's confession, Kathleen Mulhall fled the country and Gardai were unable to locate her. Linda and Charlotte, dubbed the Scissor sisters by then by the media, were both charged with murder, but they pled not guilty on the grounds of provocation, asking for the charge to be lowered to manslaughter. Linda during this time refused to take methadone for her addiction, and the judge felt that she was doing this on purpose to delay the start of the trial. By the start of the trial, Charlotte had also welcomed a baby. The 2 sisters' trial started in October 2006. Charlotte Mulhall was convicted and sentenced for murder and was given the mandatory life sentence. Linda Mulhall was convicted and sentenced for manslaughter and given a 15-year sentence due to her proving provocation. It was most probably based on the fact that Farah had physically had his hands on Linda. Linda had also been the one to confess to the murder and had fully complied with the investigation. The court also felt that she had shown remorse. The judge presiding over the trial, however, stated during sentencing that it was the most grotesque killing that had occurred in his professional lifetime. Both women were sent to serve their time in Mountjoy Women's Prison in Dublin. Linda attracted further media attention when she slit her wrists and was sectioned. Charlotte also did her part to gain media attention when a photograph of her holding a knife to a male prisoner's throat was published. That action resulted in an increased security presence in all Irish prisons, and Charlotte was moved from Mountjoy to Limerick. Kathleen Mulhall was located in England in February 2008, now a blonde, and voluntarily returned to Ireland, facing several charges. She was charged with, among other offences, 2 counts of giving false information to the Gardai about Noor's whereabouts and withholding information which she knew or believed would be of assistance in prosecuting her daughters for Noor's murder. She was also charged with impeding an arrest in the murder investigation. She pleaded guilty to helping clean up the crime scene in order to conceal evidence. Kathleen Mulhall was sentenced to 5 years in prison in May 2009. Linda Mulhall appealed the severity of her sentence on the grounds that it was passed without psychiatric and probationary reports. This appeal failed, with the Court of Criminal Appeal finding the sentence to be appropriate. Charlotte Mulhall requested leave to appeal her conviction on the grounds that the justice presiding over their trial had put pressure on the jury to reach a verdict, even though the foreman had indicated that they were deadlocked. This appeal also failed on the grounds that the defense did not raise any objections to the comments during the trial and the fact that the jury was not affected by any alleged undue pressure to reach a verdict. In fact, they took several days to reach a verdict. The case, which has dominated news coverage in Ireland from 2005 to the present day, has resulted in several books being written and has been examined in at least one television series. Unfortunately, after Linda and Charlotte were charged, their father hanged himself in a park in December 2005. The girl's brother, James Mulhall, was also later charged and pleaded guilty to the robbery of 2 sex workers, claiming that he robbed the woman to support his own 6 children and his sister Linda's 4 children, who he took on after she was jailed. Whilst in prison, Charlotte indicated that she hates her sister Linda, as well as the nickname that they were given, the Scissor sisters. She claimed that she felt Linda deserved to take more of the blame and that she alone knows where Farah's head is buried. She also said that the nickname given to them made them sound like monsters, which they weren't. She said that the murder was an event that merely got out of control. As of today, Linda and Kathleen have both been released from prison. Linda refuses to have any contact with her mother whatsoever, and every attempt that Kathleen has tried to make to contact her has been shot down by Linda. Linda to this day feels her mom had much more of a hand in the murder, and the fact that she fled the country and left both her and Charlotte to deal with the aftermath and not take responsibility for her own part is something that she will never be able to forgive. The Mulhalls will forever be associated with one of the most gruesome murders in Irish history, and also the most terrible eyebrows that I have ever seen.
This murder had happened during a hugely chaotic day of drink and drugs, and with a lot of emotions going on. They hadn't set out to murder Noor, but it was really what they did after he was killed that showed how calculated they were. Had the murder occurred in that spur of the moment, when tensions had risen in the house, had they at that point called for help and put their hands up, it would have been a completely different situation. But they had gone to such lengths to cover it up that I think they were seen as very calculating.
When you analyse what actually happened that night, it happens quite regularly in all societies where something happens when people are drunk, someone picks up a knife and they stab someone and another person maybe hits them. It was the dismemberment of the victim's body which made this a notorious killing. And it was more shocking because there were women that had engaged in this, and they were seen as ordinary women, and they were sisters.
He had lied all the way, and he had committed crimes while he was here, and he had raped women, and, you know, had he survived, God knows how long more or how many more victims he would have taken himself.
For the Mulhall family, the murder is just another tragic episode in a spiral of violence, drugs and abuse.
So that is the end for today. I hope you enjoyed this case. As always, please let me know what you think of the case in the comments down below. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. As always, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you have gotten this far, I really do appreciate you so much. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. It's a free way that you can help me out. Until next time, bye!